Hello and welcome back to No Bullshit. Today we're talking about the new hit video game for the PlayStation 4 called Spider-Man. This game came out last weekend. You've probably noticed me using some of the footage in the background a few times. Looks pretty cool, right? I really love the gameplay in this one if we're being honest. It's not only a good, fun, new Peter Parker story, it's also an excellent web-swinging, brawling adventure. Spider-Man PS4 really has a lot of upsides to it, and there's not much to hate about it either. Besides a few boring side quests, Spider-Man is just good, clean, old-fashioned fun. But of course, there's always one group out there who can find a way to get offended by something, by anything. And if you guessed it was the SJWs once again today, well, you're of course right. But can you guess why they're offended by this PG-13, squeaky clean, crowd pleaser, happy-go-lucky superhero game? Well, it's not because they're scared of spiders. And since you've probably already read this video's title, you already know. The left doesn't like Spider-Man because in the game, you're often helping cops, which makes total sense knowing it's a superhero game. You fight crime and inevitably, you're going to be siding with law and order and the police. Now sure, the police presence in Spider-Man is perhaps a bit bigger than other games, but it also makes sense for this character. He is the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man after all, and since his neighborhood is New York City, he's got plenty of crime to keep him busy. And I'm sure the game's creators at Insomniac Studios never thought this would be an issue. Who in their right mind would think helping cops could be seen as a bad thing? Well, if you know the progressives and SJWs like I do, you might have seen this coming. The best explanation I can give for left-wingers hating the police is they are trying to defend and protect minorities, who, I hate to break it to you guys, but they tend to commit more crimes. Whether it's the poorer blacks in the ghettos robbing and killing each other, like in Detroit or South Chicago, or it could be the immigrant Mexicans and South Americans crossing our southern border and squatting in the states illegally. That and the liberals, of course, are often corrupt themselves, being shady politicians and even making backroom deals and accepting illegal donations. Combine all this and you've got a pretty anti-law and order party. So it makes sense when white Democrats spend a lot of time trying to get votes from blacks by supporting Black Lives Matter, a super anti-cop group which is also pretty racist. And then there's also the protesting of ICE they do, some even demanding that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department be completely abolished. Insane, I know. None of this anti-cop, anti-law and order stuff makes a lick of sense, of course. This is just the best way to describe the leftist anti-cop position. They think normal cops are racist against blacks, and border cops are against browns. And this strategy has helped Democrats get minority votes for years now, but I also think it's beginning to become exposed as bullshit day by day too. Obviously the cops are not our enemies. In fact, the police are the ones keeping this whole country together. They're the ones upholding law and order, arresting criminals, not to mention risking their lives daily. Law enforcement shouldn't be attacked or shunned. They should be praised and rewarded. The cops are the real heroes in this world, so it's fitting that a fictional superhero like Spider-Man would work with them. And actually, I noticed how well Spider-Man worked with the police and respected the NYPD right away in this game. But while I was thinking, hey, that's cool, Spidey is like a super cop helping them out sometimes. They even had a funny bit in the game where Spidey would joke and call himself Spider Cop. Good stuff. But while normal, respectable, tax-paying members of society like me think helping the cops and respecting them is great, the leftists and SJWs on the other hand have a far different opinion of them. For more details on why SJWs are flipping out over Spider-Man helping cops, let's turn to an article from the Concourse called "They Turned Spider-Man into a Damn Cop and It Sucks." Check this bullshit out. The new Spider-Man video game came out for PlayStation 4 last week, and I was eager to spend a chunk of my weekend playing it. Some things I immensely enjoy during my few hours of playtime: web swinging, jumping off buildings, web swinging, whispering, "Whoa, that looks just like the real Empire State Building," and web swinging. One thing I definitely did not enjoy is how the game turned Spider-Man into a friggin' cop. Granted, I am only a few hours into the game, but so far the primary objective boils down to help the cops. Not just any cops either, but the NYPD specifically, because the game takes place in a true-to-life rendering of New York City. It's dumb to expect video games to be responsible reflections of real life, but it is also impossible for me at least to not feel some ickness about the game forcing me into cahoots with even a fictionalized version of the NYPD, an organization that routinely oppresses some of the most vulnerable residents of the city I live in. The New York Police Department oppresses some of the most vulnerable residents of the city, you say? Citation needed, please. As far as I know, the NYPD aren't oppressing anyone. What they're doing is enforcing their laws and arresting and punishing violators and criminals. This is not oppression. Arresting a black man for doing drugs is not oppression. Deporting a Mexican for immigrating illegally is not oppression either. This is called enforcement of the laws of the land. Plain and simple. And of course, this is really a good thing. I think what's really going on here is this SJW reporter sees more blacks and browns being arrested, and instead of blaming them and holding people accountable for their actions, no, that's too fair and rational for this guy. The left-wingers like to treat minorities like helpless children, so it's never their fault when they're arrested. It's the cops' fault because they're racist, according to the left-wingers. And this is so stupid, clearly. It's like blaming your mechanic when your car breaks down. It's not the mechanic or the cop's fault, guys. They're the ones fixing the problems, not making them happen. And back to this case, I think what the writer is upset about is minorities getting arrested more, which isn't the cop's fault because they caught them. It's the criminal's fault for breaking the law, which I'm sure would be the conclusions these same kinds of liberals would reach if it was a white man getting arrested. And speaking of the races and identity politics of all this, did this left-wing writer even consider what races the police officers are? Because I really hope he doesn't think all cops are white, especially not in New York. The NYPD is just as diverse as New York City itself, which is to say it's very diverse. Even in the video game version, Spider-Man's most frequent cop connection is a character called Yuri Watanabe, an Asian chick who's nice, funny, cute, and really not oppressive at all. I mean, can minorities even be racist in America according to left-wingers? I didn't think so, but then again, they also basically consider Asians white at this point, in their own little messed up racial hierarchies. I'm not grasping for as many straws as it may appear. Spider-Man doesn't just help the cops by catching armed robbers and putting deranged supervillains in jail. He helps them maintain a high-tech citywide surveillance network. One of the ongoing missions in the game is to have Spider-Man repair NYPD-operated and Oscorp-constructed surveillance towers that stand atop various buildings throughout the city. When these towers are repaired, they allow the NYPD to monitor all citizens within a certain radius of the tower, and for Spider-Man to get real-time updates on happenings within the city via an uplink with the towers. This is a game mechanic that will be familiar to anyone who has played an open-world RPG in the last decade. What the towers functionally do is reveal areas of the game map to players so they can find additional missions and collectibles. But it isn't strictly a game mechanic, it's also a narrative choice, and one that comes with some pretty obvious real-life parallels. The NYPD buying cutting-edge equipment and software from a shady tech company owned by a billionaire with maniacal tendencies so it can monitor and collect data on citizens is a dystopian yet sensible video game plot point. It's also literally something that happened in the real New York City. Well, I'm pretty sure every big major city like New York has had some sort of surveillance system, as they should. There are millions and millions of people on a small, highly stacked island there. Using whatever modern technology that's available to help police sounds like a pretty good idea to me. Now sure, I also believe in the right to privacy as much as the next guy, but I would also like to be staying in a city that's safe and protected too. And yeah, you may have to trade away some of that privacy in a bigger city like New York if you want to be safe. With that said, I'm curious what real-life shady tech company and billionaire this article is alluding to here. I'm sure it's not some diabolical supervillain like in Spider-Man, like how this author implies. It's hard to say though, based on just this, but after doing a quick Google search, two relevant results came up. First, there's the more recent story about IBM secretly using New York's CCTV system to train its software. A pretty big screw up, but it was also just watching people on the streets of New York, where you should expect to be seen or on camera or something anyway. Next, there's a more relevant result I found, which leads to a page at the ACLU website. It's called the Fact Sheet on the NYPD Muslim Surveillance Program, and it goes over how since 2002, the NYPD has engaged in religious profiling and suspicious surveillance of Muslims in New York City. I wonder why this would start happening around 2002. Gee, I wonder. Could it have been those suicide pilots who crashed multiple planes into New York City on September 11th, 2001? Of course the officials were keeping an eye on the Muslims after that. They're a small, weird, cult-like clan, living by its own rules in America, a country they just attacked and killed thousands of people in. And in my opinion, this still represents a threat to this day. Sure, it's been 17 years, but that doesn't mean we should let our guard down again. Not now or not ever. And this is why the NYPD surveillance system makes sense. And it also makes sense why leftists would be against it too. Think about it. It's biased against our former attackers, the Muslims, which of course is another brown minority the Democrats are protecting in order to try and get the votes from down the road. Spider-Man deserves better than to be allied with such forces. A big part of the character's appeal is that he is just as much under the thumb of the city as the people he tries to help. He's from a shattered family. He works multiple jobs. He can't pay his bills. He's stressed out all the time. He's not a hero who swoops down from high in order to save the commoners from themselves. He is a commoner. Therein rests everything that is inspiring about the character. He's just a guy who wants to make life better for the people who are dealing with the same struggles he is. What this new game does is put Spider-Man up on a perch where he doesn't belong. He's no longer performing heroic deeds out of just the goodness of his heart, but also for the purpose of solidifying the existing power structure's grip on the city. Again, this is how the first few hours of the game works, and maybe there's a forthcoming plot twist in which Spider-Man realizes he no longer wants to be an agent of the state. All I know is that it kind of sucks to play a game in which Spider-Man, in the process of beating up some drug dealers, taunts them by yelling, "If you just got real jobs, you wouldn't have to work so hard at being criminals." Now, what's so wrong with Spidey yelling that? It's a true statement. If criminals had real jobs, they wouldn't have to break the law to survive. This is a completely reasonable response, but it is said in a joking, sarcastic tone by Spider-Man. But I really don't get what the writer's problem is here. Not only is he trying to vilify the cops for no good reason, he's also defending criminals, implying that it's not their fault they're committing crimes or something. something. Jesus, dude, it's time to get your shit together. Unless you got some real reasons to show why the NYPD is corrupt, or at least some kind of evidence of 1 or 2 officers breaking the law, unless you're ready to fully explain why you hate law enforcement, let's just quit with the vague and useless platitudes. All I've seen here is this guy complain about cops being oppressive and using too much surveillance. Basically, he hates the police for doing their jobs, which is enforcing law and order and keeping the city together. But the SJWs think that's an existing power structure solidifying its grip on the city, whatever that means. And then they have the balls to defend criminals after that, illegal drug dealers, and, well, I just can't keep up with this anymore. Even though the left tries to ruin everything, I won't let them. Not my vidya, and not the police either. Spider-Man is a great video game, and it's in no way hindered by having missions where you help the police. Only a lefty idiot would think of it in this angle, which requires a good amount of mental gymnastics to reach. And it all starts with the false assumption that the cops are racist, biased, oppressive monsters, when they're really not. The police are the real heroes in this world, and they deserve much more respect than all of this. What do you guys think? Was Spider-Man ruined by having missions where you help cops? Do you follow the social justice warrior logic about cops being evil and oppressive? And what about the surveillance bit? Is the NYPD right to be more paranoid and protected in a world after 9/11? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. See y'all next time.